Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TheMsTexasShow. This is the show where we bring in our amazing survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault. In this show, we also ask our community leaders to come on the show and share with our community the resources. We have a segment called Military Time. And under this segment, we invite our military and veterans to share their stories during and after their services. We have another segment called Beauty for Ashes. That is a segment where we invite our pageant sisters, our artists, actors, filmmakers, dancers, singers, musicians, last but not least, our survivors who are now ambassadors in the community and their platforms and what they're doing in the communities. If you would like to be a guest on this show, you can reach us by email msusatexas, missusatexas@gmail.com. You can also contact us through Facebook with the same name, Miss USA Texas. Now, without further ado, today we have a special guest, Miss Annie Margis. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We do not mention the date of the recording because this show is pre-recorded, but happy Valentine's Day, and thank you so much for getting on the show. I know a lot of people cannot make it, but thank you for your dedication for what you do.
Thank you. Valentine's Day is a good day to do this. And we're both wearing red.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That is wonderful. So a little bit bio that we're going to talk about Annie, and we're going to let her tell her story to us. So Annie is an author and filmmaker. She's a childhood incest victim turned activist. In 2012, with the help of cadre of volunteers, she created and ran an ongoing phone conference line where adult victims from around the world connected with followers. So today we are so excited to have you here. You have heard like thousands of tragic histories, and you are now a frontline expert on the lifelong impact of childhood incest. And I know this is a very touchy topic, but it's not very well talked about. And I just wanted to thank you again for doing what you do to bring this to the forefront so that people can know this, and most importantly, so that nobody, no child have to suffer this again. So with that being said, tell us how you got involved with this and how this all started.
Okay. Well, I'm going to begin with a statistic just so people understand that 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 5 boys are victimized sexually before they turn 18. And 90% of that victimization is by people they know, mostly family members, also extended family members, and that's incest. We're talking about incest, and that's a word nobody says. It's such a taboo word, and the victims of the crime don't talk about it because it's so taboo. My mission in life is to dissolve that taboo by getting people just to talk about the crime, the way that people are talking about other sexual assaults with the Me Too movement. That made it okay to say, yeah, rape happened to me. And now it's okay to say, yeah, I'm a victim of childhood incest. With that, how did I get here? Well, I got here because my father sexually assaulted me from the time that I was a little kid. I remember sitting on a chair, my feet not touching the ground, and being sexually assaulted by my father. I was probably about 3. And I think it may have started earlier than that. And it went on for years. And I don't really know how many years it went on, because when I was 10, I was in the 5th grade, I had a nervous breakdown. That's what they used to call it back then. I don't know what they call it now. But I became delusional. I had a split with reality, became delusional. And I adopted compulsive hand washing. I had to wash my hands constantly. And in my delusion, I kept thinking everything I touched was a sin and it got on me and I had to wash it off. It was a delusion, and it was related to my father. It was a sin against my father if I touched the doorknob and germs got on me, and so I had to wash them off. So that was my delusion, and I honestly believed I was the worst person who ever lived. I was 10 years old, and I went to confession. And I told the priest that I had been disobedient to my father a gazillion, trillion, million times. And I firmly believed that. As a little kid, this was my belief that I was doing all of these sins. And the priest said, "Oh, you're not such a bad kid. Just go home and do what your father says." And so I was damned if I do, damned if I don't. And I knew when he said that, I was damned. That's it. I'm going to hell. There's no way for me out of this. I have to do what he says, and doing what he says is going to send me to hell. And that's how I got well. I got well from my delusion by deciding that there was no hope for me and I might as well give up. So I gave up the whole notion of sin and hell and hand washing. And I was able to go back to school in the 6th grade. And when I got there, I didn't remember. My brain did some fancy rewiring while I was delusional, made me forget. I had no memory of the abuse until much later in life, which in a way was a blessing, but that subconscious knowledge is there and it interfered with my life in a million ways.
Wow. So do you mind I ask, like, so you said the priest told you do what your father tells you to do. What did he mean? Did he actually know? Did you tell him what he did to you?
No, I did not. I didn't, because I thought it was my sin, you know. But
Right.
no, I never said anything about the abuse to the priest. The reason he said that is that's like a line they say in Catholicism,
Mm-hmm.
that you are, you know, you have to, your father says you have to honor your father. It's a really big thing. And that's why he said that. He didn't know what he was saying. And, you know, he didn't know he was telling me to go back to abuse.
Right. Yeah, just wanted to clarify that because I think that's sort of, important information that we would like the audience to know as well. So, roughly, you said about age 10, you started the compulsive hand washing, and then you got healed because of that, went back to school, and then you forgot about the abuse until a much later age. Like, roughly, how much in between? How many years?
I'd say I was around 40 when it came back to me, so 30 years.
Wow.
And it's just amazing to think that that's even possible, but I know it was because I had no memory of it. And I blamed my anxiety, social anxiety, and my other things on other causes. I didn't, because I didn't know about the abuse at that time. And I had so many symptoms from it that interfered with my life. Some of the symptoms are very common among survivors. For example, fibromyalgia. I got that about 20 years ago, and I'm much better now, much better. It is possible to heal. But I've met so many survivors who have been diagnosed with that, and I call it the incest disease because I think it has something to do with the wiring in our brain that goes haywire. It's my theory.
Yes, no, that is totally. And I've worked with so many survivors and have been told this a lot that there could be a memory loss, and that is not a wild imagination, or for some people might think that you're crazy, and you're not. And so it's wonderful that you're doing what you're doing now. So do you think that during that 30 years period is what you have sort of contributed to unknowingly this despite the symptoms you were working on, what you're doing now, say the filmmaking or other projects? And then do you think that there's like whether we say a higher purpose of this happening, so that you can have all those abilities, all those skills to do what you're doing, to help bring this cause and raise the awareness to a higher level?
I I'm an atheist, and I don't really believe that there's like something that said, okay, we're going to have you abused, but it's okay because we're going to do this. I think it was just a horrible crime, and I was a victim. And because of that crime, I have done many things to help other people who've been victims as well. And I probably wouldn't have done that if I weren't a victim myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So are you doing some, projects like in the filmmaking that's related to that? I'm sure our audience would like to know that.
Yes. Well, let me tell you the story of my novel. Here's my novel. It's right here. It's called The Ugliest Word. Know what the ugliest word is?
The
You know?
Douglas word. No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just teasing. The ugliest word is incest. And that's what this book is about. It's a novel, not a memoir. And it just follows a little girl through the experience of being abused and into her adulthood, and it shows what kind of woman she ends up being. This book came about, had a long road. At first, I met somebody who told me he was a victim. That was the first person who ever told me. And at that time, I had already regained my memories, but I had never told anybody. So I wrote a little poem about it. And I gave him the poem and let him read it. And that was my first attempt at communicating it in writing. And then that poem turned into a short story, just a little story. And I let only a few people read that. And then I wrote a play. I wrote an actual stage play. And the reason I wrote a play is because I heard dialogue. Probably because I was on the phone conference all day, every day. That's probably why I heard dialogue. But I wrote it because I wasn't seeing things. I was hearing people talk. And so that's the play. It's called Say a Few Words, and it's on Amazon. And then from the play, I gave the play to a producer who was a client of mine. And he read it and he said, let's make the movie. And so I said, okay, let's make the movie. And he says, but you have to rewrite it. You have to write it about childhood, not adulthood, because the play was about adulthood, living with the repercussions. So I had to rewrite it. So I rewrote it and I gave it back to him. That was hard to do too, to write about childhood experiences. Whew. So I gave it back to him and he reads it and he comes back to me and he says, I can't do this movie. It was too much for him. He couldn't deal with what it said. However, another producer that I know read the play and said, yes, let's do this movie. And yes, let's do this screenplay. And we are actually sort of kind of in pre-production. I say sort of kind of because there's not a big push for it right now. We just put out the novel, and so that's taking a lot of my time, but I will get back to the movie. The main thing I have to do is fundraise, get people to back it. I have everything else I need to produce it, just the money to pay people. And so that's where the movie stands. Oh, and then after we started making the movie, it occurred to me that I always wanted to write a book. And so I changed the screenplay into a novel. And that's what we have today, the novel.
Wow. So for our audience who want to know about the movies, so they can kind of preview the movie through the novel, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
And tell us, our audience, like, would that be correct to get the, like, if they wanted to order the novel, where can they order? Is it the ugliestword.com, or where can they order the book at?
You can order it through theugliestword.com. There's a button, and it takes you to Amazon. It's available through Amazon.
Okay, so we're going to include this website at the content section below. This way, if you're interested, then you can find out where the book can be purchased, and this will give you more information about Annie as well. Wow, this is so awesome. I'm so proud of you. I know that especially during this time, during COVID, the production has been slow, and that, despite that, you had been working with two producers and who has the interest in building that. This is just so amazing. I cannot say enough. I cannot wait to watch the movie, and definitely, we want to bring you back on at a later time just to, bear us the update about that. Now, back to the phone conference. I know that earlier on we were reading your bio, and you talked about the phone conference. You were also talking about how this kind of went about from a poem to a stage play to a movie, and this was all from the phone conference. Tell us more about this. Where can people call you at? Is it like a 800 number? How does this work?
Mm-hmm. I'm not on that phone conference at this time. However, it's still very busy and wonderful. And I'm not allowed to say the name of the program because it's an anonymous program. And you're not supposed to say in media, you're not supposed to associate yourself with the program. It's their rule. However, if you just Google incest survivors and look for phone conferences, now there are a lot of them because of COVID. There's a lot of phone conferences, and the way they work is everybody just gets 5 minutes to talk, and then you stop talking, and no one is allowed to cross-talk, respond to you in any way, comment on what you had to say. It's a very safe place to share, so it's not scary.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, we respect that. As a matter of fact, I've attended those similar style phone conferences. Some of them are phone conference, some of them are Zoom conference, and prior to the COVID, it was kind of in person, and people actually meet in a group, and they, connect to each other. And like you said, the primary goal, same as the primary goal of this show, is to provide a safe platform for people to share their stories, for them to share their stories, their journey, their healing journey, to share the hope and the love with the community. And our community, is composed of people who are victims, survivors, and their supporters, and activists, and so many wonderful people that are working tirelessly to make sure that, this doesn't happen to our children again. So this is so lovely that what you're doing now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a commercial break, and we'll come right back.
This isn't a house, and it's definitely not a home. It's a prison. The shackles may be invisible, but they are still very real.
What did you say to me? You think you can hide from me?
We all wonder why the victims of abuse just don't leave. It's simple, really. You can't leave if you don't have a place to go. Hope Pigs Global will be that place. If you need help or want to find a way to help, visit hopepigsglobal.org. The end of abuse starts here.
All right, we are back. Well, this is the Miss Texas Show, and this show is sponsored by Hope PYX Global. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports people from all backgrounds who are victims, survivors, their family supporters of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and sex trafficking. Now we're gonna go back right to the topic. Annie, so you have so many wonderful things, and despite of what you have been through from your childhood, incest and sexual abuse. Now, for the people that are listening, as you mentioned, that's whether we call the ugliest word or something that people, it's still very new. And we love that, it's great that the hashtag Me Too movement, that people are coming upfront about this. But still a lot of people, either they're still kind of like you had a memory loss. So how can we help people to, recognize that, let's say if a person who is a victim, a child is a victim of incest and childhood sexual abuse.
How do you recognize that, are you asking?
Yes.
Yes, I actually have a list of a list of, I'm so sorry, indications, a list of indications that a person may have been sexually abused. And they include, this might be upsetting to listen to, bruising, bleeding, urinary tract infections, sexually transmitted diseases, nightmares, bedwetting, failing grades, cruelty to animals, bullying or being bullied, fire setting, self-harm of any kind, withdrawal from friends, secretiveness, age inappropriate sexual behavior, drawing sexual pictures, chronic stomach pain, genital discomfort, alcohol or drug use, running away, anxiety, suicide, depression, anger, rebellion, physical aggression, and non-compliance. So those are behaviors and moods we can watch out for in children. And if you see a bunch of them, then you can suspect that maybe that's what's going on.
Wow. That is just like you said, it could be very bothersome to listen to, the list of the symptoms. And thank you for sharing that. Now, what are the lifetime ramifications of childhood sexual abuse?
I have a list of that as well. And I can say I have most of these ramifications myself. Lifetime diagnoses of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, sleep disorder, self-harm, suicide, engaging in unsafe sex, drug, alcohol abuse, fibromyalgia, it's on the list, severe PMS, chronic headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, and sexual health complaints. And people who have a history of childhood sexual abuse are 30% more likely to have a serious health problem than people who are not victims. So it affects our health.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, I believe that it affects the physical health as well as the mental health, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I still have physical reactions. Well, sometimes a thought will come to me and my body will just do that. It'll just jerk. without, I can't control it. It just happens. And that's a body response to it. I hope that someday it won't happen anymore, because it happens a lot less than it used to.
Right.
I'm hoping eventually it will go away.
Yeah, that sounds like, the sign of PTSD. It could be a trigger that you were reacting to a certain, whether it can be a sound or a word or a smell or a vision or anything that, it totally depends on what has happened to you. And these triggers are different from people to people. So, from there, I wanted to ask, like, for our audience who are, whether they are people who care about their loved ones, and whether they're a child now or whether they're an adult now, when they see their loved ones, their friends having these kind of symptoms, what can they do to help? How can they help?
Well, you can ask, you can say, I've noticed this about you, and maybe state what you've noticed, and then say, is anything wrong? Is anything going on? And be open to an answer. And you won't always get an answer, because a lot of times people won't open up about it. But when they do open up about it, the most important thing you can say is, I believe you. Because that's one reason we're afraid to talk about it, because we're afraid we're not going to be believed. So giving them that support right up front, that's really important.
Yes, that's totally true. So, and do you think, like, for a person, if they're watching now, they say, "Oh my God, I remember now, this has happened to me." What advice would you give it to them?
The best thing for my healing was talking to other people who went through the same thing. That's where I found the most help. And that was on that phone line that we mentioned, which is still in existence, so you can join it. I spoke every day with victims, and I listened to many stories every day of victims. And it made me realize it wasn't my crime. It wasn't their crime when they're telling me what happened to them. They didn't do anything wrong, and I could see that so clearly, and it let me see that it wasn't my crime. And I felt so much love and care for them, and wanting them to feel better, that I was able to turn that toward myself as well and start caring about me, because I'd always put myself last. I don't do that anymore.
Well, yeah, it's great that you mentioned, the self-love. That's very important. Coming from the culture I came from, I am from China originally. I remember arguing with my friends, American friends, when I first got here, and they were like, "Love yourself." I'm like, "No, we don't love ourselves. We love you. We love our, loved ones. Otherwise, that means selfishness." But I think it's really important, what I now as an American proudly learned, that only when you can love yourself can you love another person. So you have to learn to love yourself. And especially, with the trauma that whether it's a child, especially a child, it's even worse, because their brains are not fully developed when they went through the trauma. But even an adult, when they go through that, there have been times that, unfortunately, with this incest, sometimes it's more complex. It could be emotional as well. So it's very difficult for them to cope with that. And then it could lead to, even adulthood struggles. So what are your advices for those adulthood struggle? One of the many, we talked to people from, like, let's say, Boy Scout of America and all the survivors from those crimes. And they simply, one of the biggest issues is the trust issue, relationship issue. So what can you tell those people about any advices? And I know some of these, it has happened long time ago, but it came back. So how can they cope with it?
And it's the same answer. Talk to other survivors and find out how they cope with it. Get ideas from them. Personally, I cope by doing a little bit of yoga, easy yoga, and meditation. And I cope by writing every day about, not always about incest anymore. I used to, it was always about that, but not anymore. Now I just write creative fiction. And that's a way of coping, a way of turning off the mind that thinks about incest and turning on the mind that's thinking about something else. That's a good coping skill for me. Going to therapy is helpful. I had to go through a lot of therapists before I found one that could help me at all. And he's not even a specialist in it, but we're on the right wavelength together, and it works for me. And I would recommend to people when they look for a therapist that they ask other survivors that hopefully they've met now, and ask them, well, who's your therapist? Because you'll find somebody that has experience, hopefully, or they'll steer you away from the people who don't have the experience.
Right. Yeah, that's so helpful that you mentioned that, because like we all know that back then this is not something that is talked about. This is not something that people are aware. So especially therapists, and still nowadays there are therapists that are not trauma informed, and it's not their not experience, but they all have their different areas of specialty. So I think you're right. It's very important to find someone who is trauma informed, who had experience, and who, like Annie said, who has the wavelength that you can connect with. Someone might be having that, but if you don't have the same wavelength, then that might not work. So that's great advice. And I love what you said, to the people that are listening, that just because you were a victim doesn't mean that you're a victim now, and that wasn't your fault. That was a crime that took place on you, that happened to you. You didn't do it. That wasn't your crime. So don't let that label you. And with that being said, Annie had mentioned, like, there are so many different kind of resources, especially now with COVID, resources online, such as the phone conference that you can Google. We also provide a support group called Survivors Against Violence Everywhere. And we're going to put the link below so that you can join as well. This is a safe platform that we wanted to provide to all the audience as well as their supporters. We understand that, not just the survivors and victims, the supporters can be going through things, because things could happen to our audience, whether it is the victim or survivors, something triggered them, and they could have that emotion pour on the person actually love them, who is supporting them. But that is very vital for the supporter to get the support, so that they have a platform to chat with other supporters as well. So we wanted to provide this safe platform that we can share each other's stories, support each other, and get on the hope and healing journey together. And we're going to put that on the link below as well. But thank you so much, Annie. I cannot begin to say enough. Thank you for, one is you making the time on this special day with me and to share this important cause, and also the important work that you're doing. I am so excited. I cannot wait for the movie to come out. But before I let you go, is there any, takeaway you would like to leave to our audiences?
It wasn't your fault. It was a crime. It's not your shame. Don't be ashamed of yourself. You're perfectly wonderful in every way. And somebody committed a crime against you, but you're still perfectly wonderful in every way.
That is wonderful. Yeah, I remember maybe a couple of weeks ago, I had a post talking about, a lot of the healing is really actually within ourselves. And so I posted that, if you wanted to find the person who can make the change in your life. Look in the mirror, and that is yourself. Believe in yourself, just like Annie said. You are perfectly wonderful. And with that, and I also remember that we also are offering a free book called I Am Enough by Marissa Peer. And shout out to Marissa Peer for supporting our important cause. So we're gonna put the registration link below for this free book. If you're interested, it's totally free. We'll send you the code so that you can access the ebook. And once again, this is the Miss Texas Show. And if you think this show is helpful, please help us share this message, because sharing is caring. And thank you again, Annie, so much for your time. And we would love to bring you back when the movie is ready and tell us more about this.
Okay.